When they were buying diamonds and gold from me to hedge against inflation, they own the 21st largest insurance agency in the country. There was no social media, right? Yes, it was a horrible, horrific accident, but God used it in a meaningful way in my life. And that was amazing for about 18 months. It's like one of my core values, everything's figure-outable. And it just trashed me. I mean, completely trashed me. And I can't tell you the weight that was lifted of me because I forgave somebody for something that they did to me. I just decided right there I was going to kill him. I got a rifle, be content in all circumstances, but never complacent.
Big A, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nickolas, thanks for having me, buddy.
Excited to have you. We're going to waste no time. I'm going to jump right in. I got a long-winded question to start us off.
Okay, let's go.
10 years old, got your first job at the bread box. Then you moved into mowing lawns, and later you worked with Herb Berry at his pawn shop. We're going to fast forward to 1979, and you convince entrepreneurs, Roger and Dale, to invest $150K to start your own pawn shop.
Right.
So I used an inflation calculator.
Right.
That would be $666,448.35 today. If you were Roger and Dale, would you have given 18-year-old you that investment opportunity?
Yeah, I would. Knowing me, I would have, because I've really made it worth their while. But let me go back and give you a little precursor to that story. So when they were buying diamonds and gold from me to hedge against inflation, they owned the 21st largest insurance agency in the country at the time. And they were trying to hedge against inflation. So they were coming in our pawn shop and they were buying trays of diamonds and gold, and they were putting it in a lock box. And they did this week after week, month after month, year after year. For a couple of years, they were buying just tons of gold and silver and diamonds. And so I went to them one day and I said, hey, why don't we take your money and my experience and open a pawn shop? And they said, you're 18. Like, how in the world are we going to do that? And then he said, how much will it cost to open a pawn shop? Well, Nickolas, I didn't have a formal education and I didn't really know. I said, I'll get back with you in 2 weeks. So I went home and made up a bunch of numbers. I just said, this is about what I think it would cost. And I went back and I said, I think it'll be $150,000. And that was in the 70s, like you said, to open that. And they said, let's do it. And I'll tell you, man, when I got that checkbook and went out and got my car, I wanted to throw up. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, now I've got to really go make this thing happen. And we did.
Yeah. Seems like it worked out great.
Yeah.
You started
it worked
growing,
out good.
expanded.
Yeah,
I've also heard some of the nuggets of the story where you also, and I'll circle back to this a little bit later too, is the first 18 months you were working there alone by yourself. Like
day and night.
Crazy long hours where you're just sink showering.
Yeah.
Can you tell me some of those early
So I went to summer school and night school my junior year and sophomore year of high school so I could graduate early. So I graduated at the beginning of my junior year in high school because I wanted to work. And so I had enough credits to graduate. Robin, this girl I was dating at the time, we weren't married at the time, I told her what I was going to do. And she said, hey, go for it. And so I did. And I literally worked day and night in the pawn shop. At night, Robin and I would go out and we would go to parking lots and we would put flyers on car windshields promoting the business. And we would go down each street that was in the communities where my business was at. We'd knock on the door and hand them a flyer and we would, promote the business and tell them what we were doing. There was no social media, right? You couldn't do that on social media. You had to do it conventional, old style marketing. And people started coming and they were really infatuated that a business owner would come and knock on their door and invite them to the business. And so we built an unbelievable community business with our pawn shop. And then a year later, Robin and I got married, when she graduated from high school. 2 weeks after she graduated from high school, we get married. And we continued to grow the business. And I told Robin when we first got married, I said, listen, I want to retire this debt early. It's $150,000 that I borrowed from these guys, and I want to retire this debt early. So it was set up as a 10-year loan, amortized over, 120 months, and we paid it off in 36 months. And so we poured every bit of the money back into the company, and I said, I think I can do it again. So I washed, rinsed, and repeated that a number of times, opening and buying other stores.
It's pretty amazing, for sure.
It's really not. I mean, if you think about it, it's really not. And I'll tell you why it's really not, is because we have a lot of grit, determination, and perseverance. And that story could be replicated by most everyone listening to this podcast interview today, because here's what happens though. We want instant gratification. We don't want to delay the bigger house, more cars, finer things. I was willing to pour all the money back into the company. Robin and I lived on $18,000 a year for 9 years, and we poured all the money back into the company. And I even had 2 little girls during that period of time as well. And you're like, how did you do that? Well, we lived below our means. We lived in a $75,000 house, not a $800,000 house. And we drove used cars, not brand new cars. And I poured all the money back into the business. And then we were able to build something that a Fortune 500 wanted, because we didn't spend all the profits. We reinvested it back in the company.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Anybody can, right? It's just if you're willing to work hard enough to do it.
There's also a moment with those flyers that I think is pretty important too, that you were putting them in mailboxes, and they were like, stop putting them in mailboxes.
The post office, that was against the laws, federal. Yeah, they came to my office and they said, hey, you can't put these in the mailbox. And the key word there was in the mailbox. And I said, I can't put it inside the mailbox. And they said, no. And I said, okay, thank you. And so the next night we taped them to the mailbox. We didn't put them in the mailbox. And the postman, said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to get the word out. He said, well, I can't really do anything to you because you're not putting it in the mailbox. So we continue to tape it to the mailbox.
Yeah, that's the grit you're talking about, getting creative.
Well, you got to. It's like one of my core values. Everything's figure outable, and we got to figure it out. And so we did.
The no is temporary. I love that line too. That comes up often.
Well, it does, because people
a way to do it.
People are turned off when someone says no, and in my mind, it just means no for today. It doesn't mean no always. And it's there again, having that determination. If you really set your focus on what you want, the no is only temporary. And it's a goal for me personally to turn it into a yes. And it's like, hey, let's get creative. Let's think through it. How can it be a mutual beneficial win for both of us? What can we do to make this a yes? And people start laughing. They're like, really? You're determined, aren't you? And I said, yeah, because we can make this work. It can be good for both of us. Mm-hmm. And so I just think having that fortitude within you to accomplish what you're wanting, you have to be willing to overcome those objectives and just understand that no only means no for today.
I love that. It's a wonderful mindset. Let's jump to, and you can fill in the gap there for us as you've been growing the pawn shop locations, 27. You make the sale. After the celebration of the sale has subsided a bit, we start falling into a bit of a depression.
Yeah.
When I was reading through that made me ask the question, is freedom an illusion? Because we're chasing for this sense of freedom, and then once you have it, what do we do with it?
Yeah, that's true. You said 27. You didn't mean 27 locations. You meant the
Correct.
age.
Your age, yes.
I was 27 years old when a company called Cash America there in Fort Worth, Texas, approached me, and they said, we want to buy your stores. And I said, they're not for sale. And he said, everything's for sale. I said, well, these are not for sale. And I've just bought a new location on Knowlesville Road just outside of Nashville. It's a big store. It was about 18,000 square feet. My plans was to renovate it and move the business into it. I just built a brand new location in East Nashville, just outside of Nashville, about 6 miles. And it was a brand new 5,000 foot location. I had bought property, tore the building down, and I'd built this new building. And I had a killer office in it. It was a beautiful setup, beautiful showroom, beautiful storage area. And Dan Feehan and Sam Rizzo were the guys' names that came. And one of them was the CFO, one was the president of the company. And they said, this is the third pass we've made at you, and you really don't want to sell, do you? And I said, no, I really don't. And he said, hypothetically, if you were going to sell, what would you take? And I was just trying to make them go away, Nickolas. I wasn't really interested in selling. I just built it, and I threw out a number arbitrarily. And he said, we'll take it. And I'm like, wow. And I said, I just built this new building. I just bought that new building on Knowlesville Road. He goes, oh, well, that's not for your property. That's just for your business. I said, I can keep the buildings, and you're going to give me that for the business. And they said, yeah. So I called Johnny Claude Garrett. He owned the Bank of Goodlettsville. And I said, Johnny Claude, I need to see you. So he came to my office. And I was 27 years old at the time. And he knew my story. He knew, I came from a very poor background. And he came into my office, little short guy, was only about 5'7", and dressed to the nines. I mean, these $10,000 suits. I don't know what they call us. They were ridiculous. And he stood up in my office, and I told him what they were going to offer. And he said, Avery, you don't have a choice. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, this will give you a leg up, and you're 27. 9 years ago, you didn't have anything when you started this, and this will give you a little leg up, and you can do other businesses if you want to. So I called him and consummated the deal, and 90 days later, I was done. To fast forward to your question, so I'm 27, 3 months later after the initial I'll take it, got by us. They did the due diligence. They bought the stores. I will have to add this. I'm going to boast for a moment. They had bought 300 stores prior to mine, and I gave them the numbers before they did the inventory, and we were off like $37. And he said, Avery, this is unbelievable. To you to be this accurate and this close on the inventory. And he said, this is the best store we've ever bought. And so it really made me feel good. I was proud. It was a proud moment. So anyway, so we sell out, and I wake up on a Monday morning, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. So I played golf every day. I love to play golf. I fished. I hunted. And that was amazing for about 18 months. And then I woke up one day. My wife woke me up from a nap. Nickolas, I'm embarrassed to admit this. I was in the bed, not laying across the bed or on the sofa. I got in the bed in the middle of the day. I had gained 50 pounds over the course of this 18 months. And my wife goes, this is not what I signed up for. And I'm like, I know, but I don't know what to do. And she said, I don't care what you do. Buy another business, start another business. You got to get out of the house. You got to do something. And so I went back to the pawn shop I started with when I was a kid, and I bought 50% of it. And we spent the next 10 years quadrupling that business.
Yeah. That seemed like also a pretty full circle moment too, because you asked Herb early on that first location
I did.
to go to that, and you said we should go, and he's like, no chance. And then all those years later, he's now your partner for this next year.
Yeah. There again, that shows you the determination of not taking no as the answer, right? There, in Herb's life, there had been some things that had transpired over a period of time that made him reevaluate that. But when I started helping, I had some resources, obviously, I could pour into the business. And so I came in, new energy, new ideas. He knew that I had already built up a number of stores and sold them. And so he was more willing to listen to some of the things that I had to say because I had already scaled these others. Plus, the state of Tennessee had made me president of the association, which was one of my fondest memories and moments in being in business. I'm Christian by faith, and it was a Jewish type run organization. All the pawn shops in Nashville were owned by people that were Jewish, and they said, you're Christian and you really don't know anything about this business. You're going to ruin it. And 5 years later, after befriending each and every one, they made me president of their association. And so I was for them. I wanted good for them. I didn't want bad for them. And we got some laws changed, and it was to their favor. And we just really started pouring the resources into the business. I bought the property across the street from the business. We tore it down. It was the old Madison Antique Mall. We tore it down, and we built a 5,000-foot store there. Finding out that it wasn't big enough halfway through construction, another no came up. The building next door came up. The owner said, the H.G. Hill family, they said, we buy property, we don't sell property. And we worked through another really tough situation there where I needed it, and it was really key to our success. And he kept telling me, no, it's not for sale, it's not for sale, until finally I said, surely there's something we can do. He goes, we do 1031 exchanges. And I went, I'm in, sign me up. I didn't even know, Nickolas, what a 1031 exchange was. And I quickly did due diligence, found out that it was a transfer. You could buy a property and exchange it of like kind. And so I found a property that they liked, and I bought it, and we exchanged, and now we've got a 10,000-foot store, not a 5,000-foot store, and it was key to our success in building that location.
I love it. Just if there's a no, we're gonna find a solution to it. We're gonna find a way to make it happen.
Nickolas, don't you hate it when people just get told no and they go away, though? I mean, doesn't that seem like they didn't really want it?
They didn't really want it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's like if you want something really bad enough, you're going to figure out a way. Like, it may not look exactly like you had hoped, but you're going to discover a way that's going to be mutually beneficial. And I think the key word here is mutually. It can't be a one-sided thing. And my outlook has always been, let us both win. Well, whatever it takes. That way it's a win, right? It's not just a one-sided. And you gain that reputation of, hey, Big A wants you to win too. And so you need to work with him. And so you build that reputation up over time with people when you're looking out for their benefit as well.
Yeah, definitely. Being aligned. I want to touch on the part where, here's what I've heard. I've talked to entrepreneurs, and I think this is something that many folks are striving for. They'll even say, I want to retire and be fat and happy. Or they'll say, I want to retire and go on vacation. And I've actually had a friend who sold his business, told his mentor that he was going to go on vacation. He's like, well, what are you going to do when you get back? You know? Yeah. And I think all of those...
That's important.
Yeah, all of those things is kind of, we romanticize this idea of an exit or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Why do you think it was that over time, after the 18 months, you're like, I'm itching for something?
Well, here's the thing. God created us to be in community and to grow. He didn't create us to be, stifled or go backwards. And so I think that we're creator developers. God created us to really strive to improve, to better, to grow. And when you're just sitting there, you got a little bit of money in the bank, and there's nothing wrong with that. I hate it when people with money go, money's not important. Money's really important, right? I love nice things. I have a nice boat, a nice house, a nice car. We take nice trips. I love those things. But it doesn't scratch the itch like being purposeful and meaningful does. And when you start a business, and like now today we have Iron Sharpens Iron Brotherhood, and we're changing men's lives all over the world. We're in, I think, 5 different countries now around the world, and we're changing people's lives. Their marriages are better. Their relationships with their kids are better. Their businesses are scaling. They have more free time. We help them with boundaries. We help them with mindset. We can get you in a place that you're like, you're not burnt out. You're not hating money coming. You're like looking forward to it because it's meaningful. It's purposeful. But when you are just building a business to make a little money so you can quit, I just want to tell you and encourage those that are listening to this today, stop feeling that way. Think about the good things that you could do with the money, the people that you could help, the other businesses that you could start that would create jobs, the revenue that you could gain as a result to do nice things for your family, but also how you could give somebody an opportunity like those 2 guys gave me. It's when your disposition and your attitude changes towards looking for the reasons that you want to make more money. I had a guy join the Mastermind recently, and he's a wealth manager. He's got about $500 million under management, and he said he wanted to get it to $1 billion. And I just asked him during the interview when he was joining, I said, what is it that you want to do with the additional capital that you're going to make as a result of getting your $1 billion instead of $500 million? And he said, well, I hadn't really thought about that. And I said, how old are your children? And he said, 12 and 16. I said, how long is it going to take you to get it to $1 billion? He said, about 5 years. So I said, well, in 5 years, your son and your daughter are going to be gone, and you're going to miss some of the most formative years of their life. Is it worth it for an excess that you don't even know what you're going to do with? Mm-hmm. And he said, man, I hadn't even thought about it like that. I don't think that it's a bad aspiration to get it to $1 billion, but what are you going to do with those resources? And what is the relationship capital that you're going to spend in your own family to get there? Because if you go home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers, you still end up a loser. Mm-hmm. And I don't want people to do that. I want them to have a well-rounded life to where they enjoy the finer things of life, but at the same time, they're not spending the relationship capital in order to get there. See, I did that. I almost lost my family when I was 40 years old because I was so focused on making another 100,000 or opening another store. And I was like, why am I doing this? And so I really now think through, what is the end result? What am I trying to accomplish? And why do I want to go there?
I love that. That's great. Because I think so often, and even for myself, not having alignment of like why we're trying to continue to strive or get additional resources if there's no real plan for them, or like you mentioned, there's sacrifice on the relational end.
The other side is I was 27 years old and my buddies were out growing their businesses, and we go out to dinner and they'd be talking about deals they did and, opportunities and scaling their business. And I got nothing to add. Well, I shot a 73 today at the golf course, or I caught an 8-pound largemouth, but like, oh, well, good. And then back to the business conversation. The other thing is I felt like I was wasting a lot of my effort and energy on doing just pleasurable things. Nothing wrong with pleasurable things. I enjoy, but you can only fish so much. You can only hunt so much. You can only play so much golf. There's something inside of us that needs the development, the personal growth, the professional growth, the purposeful, the meaningness of what you're trying to accomplish. And a lot of people miss that. They're just hungry for the day that they can quit working. And I just want to encourage the listeners today to reorient your thinking and thinking, how can I best use my talents and skills to provide for my family and then provide other opportunities for others, all along the while taking plenty of vacations and buying plenty of nice things.
That's wonderful. Super sound advice. I want to touch on the question you asked the person that wanted to go from 500 million to 1 billion, because I think it's on a theme that I'm seeing, and it's about honesty. And there's two quips, I don't know if that's the right word, two little notes that I want to touch on in the honesty category. The first is doing exactly that with your clients and being honest with them to show them or express what is really happening in their situation, which I think is very necessary and we shy away from. And then also, there was a moment where you had a friend do this for you, James Ryle, who said he had a word from God.
Yeah, he did.
Quoted Isaiah.
Now, you really read the book, didn't you? I mean, you read the book, so good for you.
I read the book, but I've also seen this. So for more context for listeners, you attended our mastermind that I'm in, and it was very clear about the level of honesty that is required to reach either, I'll say, a certain level of success in relationships and in business. And it's clear that you exemplify that, and I think those are two great examples of it.
We'll go back to the story with James Ryle first. First of all, I want to say, I don't think I said this in the book, he was the best storyteller I've ever been around in my career. There used to be an organization called Promise Keepers, and James was one of their keynote speakers. He ended up going to prison. He was in a prison that his dad built physically, which was the irony of that's pretty wild. But anyway, he got out of prison. God really got a hold of his life, and he became a speaker at Promise Keepers. He was in a mastermind group with me. Dave Ramsey invited me to join his mastermind group decades ago, and so we spent about a dozen years meeting every Wednesday, and James was one of the members in that. This is a whole lot of stories that's going to have to culminate real quickly. I had an automobile accident in 2001. I ran over and killed a pedestrian on my way to the office. And Nickolas, I couldn't get over it. I mean, I literally could not get over it. I mean, I stayed in that, it's like, I'm sorry, and I hate it. I'm somebody's father, and et cetera, et cetera. Week after week, month after month, for like 6 months, I'd go to our mastermind group and I would just languish in that. I would just, I don't know what to do. And so it was a Saturday morning, and I get a phone call from James Ryle. And I looked at my phone, and I was excited when I got the call, but I was a bit perplexed also because it was on the weekend, and we always respected our weekends and we didn't bother each other. So it had to be pretty important. And I was at the Ace Hardware in Hendersonville, and I walked outside and I said, "Hold on, James." Got outside where I could hear him, and I said, "Okay, I'm here." And he said, "Hey, Big A, this is James Ryle." And I said, Sure, I know who it is. And he said, "I was thinking this morning about you and actually praying for you." And I said, "Man, I appreciate that, James." And he said, "Well, let me just tell you right out of the gate, you're wearing the hell out of everybody in our group." And I sit there and I just laughed, and he didn't. And I said, "James, I'm confused." He goes, "Oh, well, let me say it again. You're wearing the hell out of everybody in our group." And I could tell in his tone he wasn't making a joke. And I said, "James, I don't know what to say." I said, I'm sorry. I apologize. Can you be, add a little clarity to it?" He goes, "Yeah, you come in every week and you talk about this wreck. And I hate it. I hate it for the family. I hate it for that man. I hate it for you. I hate it for Robin." But he said, "I read in Isaiah this morning that there's times to take the chains from around your neck and move on. And it's time you were moving on." He said, "I'll see you. I got to go," and hung up. And Nickolas, I was so angry. And I stood there in that parking lot, and I thought I could kill this guy if I could get my hands on him right now. And then it dawned on me, he loved me enough to tell me the truth. The following Wednesday morning, I'm a big guy. You've never met me in person. I'm 6'3", 235 pounds. James is 5'7", probably 150. I got to Dave's office, and I walked around the table, and he said, "I just knew you were going to kick my ass. I just knew it." And I bent over, and I hugged him, and tears running down my face. And I said, "Thank you for loving me enough to tell me the truth." And it did something for our relationship. That's the kind of friends we need. We need guys that are going to tell us the truth, even when it hurts. And so in regards to relationship, being vulnerable, being transparent, it comes with a cost. And oftentimes it's painful, but it's most beneficial.
Do you think that is something that was learned over time, or a skill that's able to be developed? Because I do think there's a scariness to being vulnerable. There's a reason people shy away from it. There's a reason people are worried to tell their friends the honest truth. Do you think it's something that can be developed, or something that you just got to jump into?
No, I think it's something that needs to be developed, and you earn trust over time. That's not something that you can do with somebody. He had spent years and years with me in this group, and he had built a level of trust, and that takes time. And that's the reason I encourage people when they get into peer advisory groups, masterminds, accountability groups, don't be jumping around, group to group to group, just sucking them for what they're worth and moving to the next group. Because when people have context of your life, they can give you beneficial advice. And if you don't spend enough time in these groups that people have the context about your personal, professional, your spiritual, your relational, your financial background, they can't genuinely help you. So he had done the reps. He had invested the time, and he was given permission to talk to me that way because he had full context of my life. And so that's the benefit of these long-term relationships. The reason people don't want to be vulnerable is because most people live with a facade. There's a veil, and they won't allow you to pierce that because they want you to think they have it all together. The truth is we all have challenges. We all have shortcomings. We have superpowers. We have kryptonite, but we have blind spots. And the blind spots is normally what takes us down. But when you invest in an inordinate amount of time with somebody, they see these blind spots, and they learn over time how to address those in a very frank, real manner with you that will get your attention. Different people have different personalities. I'm a high D, so I'm very forward, and I can take it that way, and I want it that way. I don't want people to dance around it. I want them to just tell me straight up. Well, he knew that because he had spent a lot of time with me, so he gave it to me straight up. And I'll tell you something, it got me out of the funk. I was able then to move on, and I said, you know what, you are exactly right. Thank you for doing that. Otherwise, I'd still be under my desk in a fetal position if I didn't have somebody that loved me enough to tell me the truth.
Yeah, that verbiage is great. Love me enough to tell me the truth. I think that's something I'm going to pocket for sure. Can you tell me more about August 1st and all of the aftermath after that?
I had been at my church that morning, Long Hollow Baptist Church, where I attend. Been there over 30 years now. Been involved in leadership my whole career there. Love our church, love our pastor. David Landreth was our pastor at the time. Robbie Gallaty's the pastor now. David died about 10 years ago, our pastor. But I would go every Wednesday morning with 5 other guys, and we would spend time with our pastor. We'd pray for our families. We would pray for the church. We would just spend time in prayer, and we did that for years and years and years. August 1st, 2001 was a Wednesday, and I'd left there, and I drove to the church, and it was 5:30 in the morning, and I'd left there about 7:15, drove to my office, which was 15 minutes away. It was about 7:30 in the morning, and there was a guy crossing the 4-lane highway. There was a median in the highway, a turning lane, and I saw him pause. He ran across the 2 northbound lanes, and he paused, and when he did, I just resumed speed. And I was driving a 2001 Lincoln Navigator, big red, candy apple red Lincoln Navigator. Just bought it. Mm-hmm. And there was a bus, city bus, parked on the side of the road, and I quickly determined what was going on. He was going to catch the bus and looked like he was going to miss it. The bus wasn't even at a bus stop. It just stopped on the side of the road. And so when I picked back up speed, I was probably doing 45, 50 miles an hour, and he took off running to catch the bus, and he just didn't see me. And so, I ran over him right there on Gallatin Road. And I pulled over to the side of the road and got out, called 911. The ambulance came. The police cars came. They blocked off the road. They put me in the back of the patrol car. They said, stay here until we investigate. Talked to a number of people, and everybody said, hey, the guy took off running, Well, they called me on Saturday morning. He was still alive when they took him to Vanderbilt Trauma. And they called me at 9:30 the following Saturday morning, and they said, his name is Enrique. They said, Mr. Walker, Enrique was 77, and he didn't make it. And it just trashed me. I mean, completely trashed me. I was okay, I went about the day, and then Monday came, I went to work, and I saw myself getting really edgy. A couple of weeks had transpired, and I had pretty much of a meltdown at the office and told my partner I was selling out. I said, I'm 40 years old. I've been chasing money since I was 8. I'm retiring. And so I sold the business to him, and as a result of that, started going to the Mastermind group. Dave invited me to join the group. And what I learned from that accident is that if I had been killed that day, my legacy would have been poor kid from Nashville, Tennessee, makes enough money to retire at age 27, and nobody cares. And I thought, man, that's not what I want my legacy to be. I want my legacy to be, hey, because of Big A, my life is different. And because of Big A, he's helped me to be a better man and to be a better father and to be a better husband and better businessman. And I wanted to be remembered as someone that was an encourager and helpful. And I thought I was so inward focused on tangible possessions and making more money that I was a taker. I wasn't a giver. And the Lord really put it upon my heart to look out, help other people, encourage. And that's kind of the, precursor to starting ISI Brotherhood, is to help other people see that there's more to life than just making some money. And that's being the giver and not the taker. It's someone that's an encourager, it's a helper, that's a server, yet at the same time knows how to scale businesses and grow his business, make a little money so you can live a good life. And so there's just a complete package on the other side. The other side before that was all self-centered, all focused on me, vacation home, bigger cars, nicer house, fancy gate. Those were the things that were important to me. But I wasn't changing or impacting anybody else's life. Nobody else cared. And today, Nickolas, as a result of this mindset shift, the relationships I have are immeasurable now all over the world. The people that we've helped because of that. And so, yes, it was a horrible, horrific accident, but God used it in a meaningful way in my life.
Definitely. The legacy portion is right on the money. Definitely something to be considering for the long term. There is something that you mentioned in the book about that time when you decided to sell and retire again, and you said you thought it was a mistake. And I read that and I was surprised. And you wrote running from instead of running to. But that seemed like the right move given the circumstances. Does it still feel like it was a mistake now?
Yeah, it does. And if I had it to go back again, I think I was running from something, not to something. I was trying to get away from responsibility. And knowing what I do now at 65 years old, teaching other businessmen how to scale their business, I would have taught the right team. See, I thought nobody could do it like me. And I would have trained management and continued with the skills that I had in buying other stores, opening stores. I'm a creator developer. I'm not a maintainer manager. And after a period of time, it requires maintaining and managing, and that bores me. So I probably could have built quite a chain had I enlisted correct management to run the locations under my direction, and me being the visionary, them being the integrator, and they could continue to manage those. So, yeah, I would have done it a lot different. Financially, I could have made a lot more money because I would have had a very sustainable business that was very recognized in the communities, and it could have been, a larger brand. But instead, I was trying to run from the responsibility, so I sold it.
That makes sense. Like a one last itch for me to scratch on that portion of the story. 5 years later, when your dad was in an ICU, Enrique's daughter was his nurse. Yeah,
I didn't know that at the time. My dad had lung cancer. This was 2006, excuse me. And he had been diagnosed with lung cancer, and it had metastasized to other organs. We never told my dad that, but we knew he wasn't going to make it. So they put him in ICU. And I spent the last 2 weeks by his side in ICU. My dad and I were very close. And I'd left there one day to go get lunch and came back. And when I came back, my mom was acting all weird. And I was like, did they tell you something while I was gone? And she said, no. And I said, well, has Dad gotten worse? And she said, no. And I said, well, what's going on? She goes, I don't really want to tell you. I said, well, now you're going to tell me.
Yeah.
And there was glass walls in the ICU, and you could see out. You could see everybody out. And she pointed to this young lady over there that was Filipino. She said, you see that young girl? And I said, yeah. And I said, that's Dad's nurse. And she's been taking care of Dad, for a couple of weeks. And she said, she was in here sharing a story about her dad. And I said, really? And it never dawned on me. And I said, well, what about him? She said, well, he was killed in a car wreck 5 years ago. Someone ran over him. And that was me. And I said, did you tell her? And she said, no, I didn't want her to know. We never did tell her. And what is the irony of her taking care of my dad after I had run over and killed hers? And that just shows you, man, how life comes around full circle. So we need to always, with everybody, treat them with the utmost of respect, because you never know who's going to be taking care of your dad.
Yeah, seems like God had his hand in that for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
Does not
no
seem
doubt.
like a coincidence.
No. I actually had talked to her 5 years earlier. I called our legal counsel when this happened, and they said, whatever you do, don't contact the family. So I hung up the phone, and I found out who the family was, and I called them immediately. And I said, hey, this was her. This is the girl I talked to. She said, my mom's not able to talk to you. And but we understand my dad couldn't see good. And we had warned him repetitively not to travel alone. And he did. Well, again, the irony of this, my personal physician and he were best friends. And my personal physician called the family and said, hey, this is a good family. I know he didn't mean any harm. They said, we're not going to sue. It wasn't his fault. My dad ran out in front. So I had talked to that girl 5 years earlier, giving my condolences, my sympathy, and telling her how terribly sorry I was. And she said, we understand. No one's upset at you. It was my dad's fault. And so nothing ever came of it legally. But again, there were so many facets of that God used to teach us a very valuable lesson about the brevity of life and the things that are really important and the things that we really should be focusing on.
Yeah, man, I don't have a great segue there. I'm just gonna sit, and it's a lot to take in.
Yeah,
undoubtedly. Let's jump into another story that I got.
Sure.
For you. So, I've been cheated out of $2,000, $2,500 here and there over the course of my business career. But there is an instance where you were cheated out of $40,000.
41,000. Don't cheat me out of that other 1,000. 41,000.
There you go. 41,000. And you ended up face to face with that man who did the cheating not too long after, definitely in an unplanned way. Can you describe the context of that time and the feelings around that? Because I really resonate with that story immensely.
I was a young guy, and I had bought a piece of property at Paragon Mills. There was a condo association here in Nashville, and they had a condo property called Paragon Mills. And I went out there and bought one of the units. And I was a young guy at the time. And, 41 grand then, I don't know. You said you did a calculation of what that would be today. Back then, it's a lot of money. To me, I needed the money. And I sold him the condo. And at closing, there was a clause that I had missed. And he said, I don't have to pay you for part of this. And it equated to $41,000. And it was over a technicality. And there was a lawyer in the room and a banker and the closing attorney. And he and I. And he leaned back in the chair. We'll call him John for this interview. John leaned back in the chair and he laughed out loud. And he pointed at me and he said, I got you, big guy. I got you. And I looked at my attorney and he goes, technically, he doesn't have to pay you the $41,000. And I said, I really need that $41,000. And he said, I ain't paying it. You should have read the contract. Technically, he was right. So with that being said, I signed the papers. He got the condo. And I left. He owned a very prominent business here in Nashville. I could call the name of it. Anyone from Nashville would know the company. And I grew to hate him. The resentful, the bitterness, and how I resented him. And I was a deacon at my church. I taught Sunday school. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a business owner. And I hated him. Everything about him I hated. I wished bad for him. And so 2 years went by, and a buddy of mine, Bob calls me and said, hey, Big A, you want to go with us to Buffalo, Wyoming, antelope and mule deer hunting? I said, yeah, I'd love to. He goes, we're 16 of us going. We're going in 4, SUVs. Here's where you need to be. Here's what time you need to be there. Bring all your stuff. We're going to be gone for 10 days. And I said, okay. So Robin takes me to the appointed location. I get my guns out. I get my luggage out. Close the trunk, kiss her, hug her. She gets in the car and she leaves. And I turn around and look. And when I turn around and look, the first person that's standing there is John. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. So I went over to Bob, my buddy, and I said, Bob, what's up with John? And he goes, yeah, he's on the he didn't know the story. He said, yeah, he's going with us on the trip. I said, this is going to be a long trip. Mm-hmm. So obviously he's in another vehicle. I'm in the vehicle with my buddy. We go to Buffalo, Wyoming. We scout for 2 days. Me and John see each other. We don't even speak. Johnny Zezus owns 67,000 acres in Buffalo, Wyoming. We're hunting on his farm. I get up on top of this hill. I'm by myself. It's opening morning. And I'm scoping out the bottom with binoculars, looking for mule deer and antelope. And there's this guy walking down the bottom. It's about 400 yards away. I look closer, and it's John. And I went, this is unbelievable. I mean, like, he's in the same area as I am. Nickolas, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell the whole story. So I just decided right there I was going to kill him. I got a rifle, and I'm an excellent marksman. I've been hunting my whole life, and I said, I can kill him. I can take him out. And then I'll say I thought it was an antelope, and that'll be that. The only thing I couldn't work out in my mind is he had an orange vest on, and I didn't know how I was going to prove to the game warden that an antelope had an orange vest on. And I was shaking. I had the gun in my hand. Literally, I had the gun in my hand. I was shaking. I was so mad. I put the gun down, and I got my senses back, and I said, this is crazy to have these kind of feelings over $41,000. And it wasn't even the $41,000 as much as the humiliation. Mm-hmm. He humiliated me in front of bankers and lawyers and said, I got you, made me look like an idiot. And so got back in the car. 10 days later, we're on our way back, and his Bronco breaks down 60 miles outside of Nashville. Now, why I did this, I have no idea. All 4 cars stopped, because his broke down. The drivetrain went out in it. And I went up to him. We haven't spoken in 10 days. And I went up to him and I said, John, I said, if you can get someone to take me back to my house, I live 60 miles from here. I got a K5 Blazer at home I'm not using. You can use it until you get yours fixed. And he looks at me and he goes, Big A, I'm really perplexed. And I said, I'm forgiving you. And he goes, I didn't ask for forgiveness. And I said, no. And I'm not forgiving you for you. I'm forgiving you for me. Mm-hmm. Because I hate you. And I'm forgiving you for me. I had to let it go. And I let it go on the side of the interstate. God took it away right there. And I can't tell you the weight that was lifted off of me because I forgave somebody for something that they did to me, not even having them ask for it, because I was the one in bondage, not him. He didn't know I felt that way. But I did. So my encouragement to the listeners that are listening to your show today, you've got to forgive whatever it is that's out there in front of you. And a lot of you are like, you don't know what I've been through. No, I don't. It could have been an abusive situation with your family. It could have been with a spouse. It could have been over money. But I promise you, you're in captivity yourself. You're the one in bondage. And you need to release that and let it go so that God can use your sense of clarity, good judgment, because everything you do right now is filtered through that hatred, through that bitterness. And I'm just telling you what a freedom it was to let that go on the side of the interstate and let that go. For me, that day was miraculous.
100%. I think the worst part about harboring feelings like that when something does happen, and especially if it feels out of your control and it's towards someone, is the impact it has on your immediate relationships around you. That's the thing that always, exactly. That's the thing that always comes back to me is like, if I'm feeling this way, that person that did the wrong thing or whatever, they probably have no idea. They probably aren't even aware that I'm feeling this way. But everyone that I care about deeply,
they do
getting,
know.
Yeah, and they're getting the residuals of this. Like
they are.
I think that's the part where it's like, needing to figure out the streamlined version to like get through this so the right people aren't impacted by it.
It's not only the people that is in your peripheral view that's impacted, but it impacts every decision that you make going forward in your personal and professional life.
Yeah.
And there's just a sense of harbored bitterness that you can't relinquish. And I know that the stories out there are far greater than mine and worse than mine in regards to the depth of the wound, and I get that. And they don't deserve the forgiveness most of the time, quite honestly. But why would you want to keep yourself captive and let someone else control you with something that you do have the ability to let it go and relinquish it? God says that being vindictive is not the right spirit, and vengeance is his. And so he'll take care of it. Maybe not here. Maybe you won't even know about it. But there's a price that they're going to pay for doing someone wrong. But just let God deal with that, and you go on about your life and treat the people that, as you said, that are around you in your peripheral vision with respect, and you owe that to them. Our spouses and our children, they don't deserve the bitterness that we harbor among others, because it's keeping them from living their fullest life as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you mentioned that. That is something that I pray about constantly in terms whenever something like that happens is revenge is the Lord's. It's not on me. But then I always come back to like, well, if I am the sinner, God has already forgiven me. Maybe I'm already in that spot.
I don't know. Sometimes I'd like to see a little bit of vengeance, though. You know what I'm saying? Just give me a little view.
A little taste.
But as a result of that, I was set free that day, right? It didn't impact him whatsoever, but I was set free that day, and it was a great feeling.
Yeah, that is great. Let's switch then from those style of relationships into friendships and partnerships. We got Carl, Drew, Eddie, For Investments LLC. Yeah. And there's a wonderful quote that I wrote down. I mean, I wrote down a lot of quotes from the book, but this one especially because I think it's so good. I want to remind you that your enemies are not doing business with you, only your friends. So I want to inquire, what are your go-to best practices when you're setting yourself up for a partnership with those solid boundaries? Because they usually are your friends, and you want to keep those people in your life.
These guys, Carl Huddleston, Drew Sowell, Eddie Baker, 30-year friendships that we've had. And years ago, back in 2005, we were going to buy an investment piece of property in Destin, Florida. There's 2 twin towers down there called Silver Beach. And it was pre-construction, and we bought a 3-bedroom, 3-bath unit. We owned a company called 4 Investments, 4 of us, the number 4 Investments. And we bought stock and things like this, so we thought we'd venture out and we would buy a condo. And so we bought this condo, $575,000, and I bought it with my 3 best friends. And so I came to them during one of our meetings, and I said, here's the contract with all the what-ifs. They're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, we have kids, and later we're going to have grandkids, and we've got family and friends, and how are we going to handle this? And if I want to use it or you want to use it. And it was like 7-page document of all these what ifs. What if I want out? What if I get sued? What if I get divorced? How are you going to buy me out? So we thought through everything that could possibly happen. You can't cover everything, but you can think through a lot of scenarios. And today, 20 years later, we're still best friends. And it's because we knew what the deliverables were. We knew what the expectations were. We knew what would happen if X happened. And so people say, well, we're buddies, we're friends. And I know, but where you get tripped up is on unmet expectations causes frustrations. And so my expectations and yours may be different, and I can't read your mind. And so let's just talk through it. And I say in any business, even my daughter started working for me years ago. There was an employment agreement she signed because it's like you're an employee. Today, she's my business partner. At that time, she was an employee. But it was like, even with the business, there was a lawyer that handled the transaction. It's legal, and she's got stock, and this is how we did it. That way, you handle it properly. The people that get in trouble the most is always on a handshake deal. Well, where's your documents? Where's your articles of organization? I don't have any of that. Well, that's why you're screwed up. That's why you're in trouble. And they say, well, they're my friend. And that's where this quote I said comes from, right? Your enemy is not doing business with you, only your friends. And so you just got to handle it like it's business. That way there's never a misunderstanding.
Yeah. I think that's wise. I listen to a lot of other entrepreneur and business podcasts and things like that. And a lot of times the Q&A portion is like, I'm in business with my father and we never wrote anything down. And now I can't have access to these things I need, or now I'm not really seen as an owner because we never wrote it down, all of those things. So I think that's a great word to the wise. And it also points back to having those intentional, honest conversations, because I think sometimes you get into those partnerships and you might not want to do the paperwork because you don't want to offend or like make something weird with the friendship. And it's like, well, if you can't document this stuff, how close of a partnership can you actually create?
Here's the thing, Nickolas, you asked about some best practices. You and I probably would do fine in business together. However, I don't know your wife. I don't know your children. I don't know your aspirations. I don't know your life growing up. I don't know what your filters are. I don't know your kryptonite. I don't know your blind spots. I don't know your superpowers. I'm older than you, so I'm always going to look at it differently. My aspirations are different. My long-term objectives are different. My short-term objectives are different. We're good people. Neither one of us are wrong. It's just that we're different. And when you put those two in a partnership, money has a way of separating even the best of friendships. And I know we could talk about money in many different regards, but it always comes back to we're biased and we want things the way we want them. And when we don't flush out and have similar core values, similar life experiences, similar worldviews, we get in trouble in these scenarios, and it divides these friendships. And so I think there needs to be a lot more conversation, a lot more in writing, a lot more what-ifs, situations that happen, and how do we resolve this before we ever enter. It's kind of like dating. You don't just go meet somebody and get married, right? That's why they call it dating. It's numbers of years that you make sure that you're marrying the right person. And it's the same with business. And that's the advice I would give people. Go a little slower, really understand who they are, what their objectives are, and always have everything in writing.
Yeah, those are great best practices. Very sound. This is another theme that's coming up a lot in, maybe I should say my circles, because I don't know if they're happening in other circles, but in my circles, topic is, and you touched on it in the book, contentment versus complacency. So essentially, when is enough? We talked about that question earlier in the podcast of why do you want to make more money, or why do you want a bigger business? But also, it seems like there might be towing a line there of, well, I am content with what I have, but I don't want to fully take my foot off the gas here. What's your go-to when it comes to towing that line?
People confuse those two words. I think that in order to align with Scripture, Paul says that we're to be content in all circumstances. That's a very different word. I don't think we should ever be complacent. And even today at 65 years old, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to figure it out because God's given me a certain amount of skills, and I don't want to waste it. I want to be a good steward over the resources that he's given me, not just the financial resources, but my ability for insight, my leadership, my ability to encourage, my ability to coach. Like it would almost be wrong for me not to use those skills, but they're different today than they were. I'm not working the 18-hour days now that I used to. I don't have to, and I don't really want to. And as you get older, normally you slow down a little bit. But that doesn't ever mean stop. You can use those in a different venue. There's a lot of things I do at my church that I don't get paid for, but it's still a sense of meaning and purposefulness. And I use my leadership skills there. I use, my encouraging skills on a daily basis. There's a number of guys that I still coach one-on-one. I'm leading our team now that runs ISI Brotherhood. I'm the visionary. I've got the relationships, and I bring those in. So I'm using my skills in a different way, but it's never, and a lot of people would say, well, you're just not content. No, I'm not complacent. I'm very content, right? God owns it all. I'm just a steward over it. And so if we can look at it with that mindset, it's like, no, what can we do to further our growth? And how can we take our faith into the marketplace? And what is it that we can do to inspire other Nickolases of the world to, live a fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful life with your spouse, and how to develop your new business, and how can we partner in that? It's just a different lens that you look at as you go. So I always say be content in all circumstances, but never complacent.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Very sound. Big A, we are moving to the final question of the podcast. But before we do, I want to say thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your time. I think your book is extremely impactful, as well as the way that you live. I think it's a true testament, the kind of legacy you're hoping to leave and how you want to leave an impact on folks. So really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Of course. Final question of the podcast is, what does it mean to live a fulfilling life?
Yeah, I think that changes, Nickolas. I think a fulfilled life has different connotations throughout your life, and it's never one sense of fulfillment. When I was young, I was aspirational financially, and I was able to accomplish a few things. There was a sense of fulfillment even in that. As I got a little bit older, it was the gratification of being a good dad. I've raised two amazing daughters, Brooke and Holly, and they've turned out to be amazing moms and wives, and they're incredible. God's really blessed me with 5 grandchildren. I was able to walk the oldest granddaughter down the aisle and give her away in marriage a year ago. That was very fulfilling and gratifying that she thought enough of me to give her away. And now it's a legacy piece. Whose lives, what small business owner, what leader in some organization can I help encourage to grow to their maximum abilities and not do it at the cost of their family? And there's a great sense of fulfillment as a result of that. And so I don't think it's a one and done. I think it changes over time. And the important thing is for me, this is for me, many of you don't subscribe to Christianity or your faith, but I do desire at one point in my life when I do reach heaven is for God to say, good job, my good and faithful servant. That's a sense of gratification and fulfillment for me. And so regardless of what task I'm doing, regardless of what industry I'm in, what widget I'm selling or service I'm providing, I want to give it the best I can. I don't want to let people down, and I want it to be extremely valuable in all regards. And so for me, that'll be a sense of fulfillment.
It's beautiful. Wonderful. How can people connect with you? How can they get the book? Where can they read their own copy?
Well, it's actually anywhere that you buy books. You can go to Amazon, obviously, and get a copy of View from the Top. You can reach out to me at isibrotherhood.com. Reach out. I'd love to talk to you. If you're a small business owner or if you're a decision maker in your company, you're looking for a great mastermind group to be in. We have, 10 or so mastermind groups that meet virtually every week, and we help people accomplish the things that we've talked about here today. So reach out. I'd love to talk to you.
That sounds great. Those links will be in the show notes. Big A, thank you so much.
Enjoyed it. See you, buddy. Have a good one.